So, a pretty common question I see and hear out there is, how much do I need to save for retirement? And I think there's no real direct answer for that because there's really nothing wrong or right. It really comes down to what is your lifestyle going to be? What's your cost of living going to be? What's your income sources? And how much money do you want to have left over just to spend, to do things, just to be spontaneous? So let's talk about that a little bit. First off, what's your budget going to be? That's really what it comes down to. That's the most important part of this puzzle is you need to know how much your cost of living is going to be so that you know what you're spending every month, and that will give you an idea the number you have just to live, just to get by, right? So if you add up your rent and your utilities, what you spend on average for gas and groceries, that'll give you your basic cost of living. Everything's covered, all my expenses are covered. How much money is that? Let's just use a number. Let's just say it's $5,000 a month. Well, what's your income sources now? That's the next question to ask. You know about how much money you need just to get by. What are your income sources? If you have two social securities, if you have one social security and possibly a pension like I'm going to have, maybe you have one working spouse still and you're going to collect social security, whatever. You need to figure out what your expenses are, and then or how much money you have coming in, your income, and that will tell you how much do I actually need to have then. So if I have $5,000 a month in expenses and I have $5,000 a month coming in, I've covered my expenses. So how much do I need to save beyond that will depend on how much money you have that you want to have for spontaneous things you want to do to help your kids, maybe to buy cars, maybe a travel. So imagine, if you will, then you want to take 2 big trips a year because you want to do a great travel, amazing travel things, right? And let's say each trip is $10,000. So if you've got $5,000 of income covering your $5,000 worth of monthly expenses, you need to have $10,000 twice a year for you and your spouse, or maybe just you, to take a great, impactful trip, a memory you'll have forever, and something you can share. So let's just say that's another $20,000 a year. Well, really then how much you need to save to get to that point depends on what that disposable income number is going to be for you. If it's $20,000 a year and you're going to do that for 20 years, and then let's be honest, the last 10 years or so of your retirement, you're probably not going to be as running around as much. Maybe even the last half of your retirement. Maybe you're going to be planning to go 20 years or so. But if you got 20 years at $20,000 a year that you're going to spend above your income, there's the math, $400,000, right? 20 years times that. So if you got 400 grand and you're taking out 20,000 a year, what is that? 5%? So if you can get that 400,000 to make 5%, you're really going to get break even all the time. You're never going to really run out of money. So that's why it's really hard to say, what's this dollar amount, what's the actual number. But basing it on income, expenses, and then the money you plan to have for fun money is where it comes into play. That's how the number changes. It always surprises me how many times I see different videos and people asking, or at least see in videos about, how long will $1 million last me in retirement? Well, I don't know. What's your expenses? If your expenses are $100,000 a year, that $1 million is only going to last you 10 years unless you make 10%, which gives you $100,000 to spend every year. So if that's your only source of income is what you have saved, you're going to have to be pretty good with that money. If you have resources, though, that are going to pay you monthly, that cover all of your basic expenses, how much money you have and need is going to depend on what you plan to spend without thinking about money, right? One of the things I loved about Tony Robbins used to talk about is once you find your number, you don't have to worry about having any more than that. And that number is kind of like the way Tim Ferriss brought it up in the 4-Hour Work Week too, is that if you cover all of your expenses, the number is that number plus whatever you plan to have for fun and for giving and for giving back to your kids and the community or whatever. So take that number and say, here's my income sources, here's my monthly expenses. I've got those covered with my income sources. How much more do I need? Because at some point, you have to say, how much more do I need? How much money do I really need to have the kind of life I expected to have? Nobody can predict the unexpected expenses that come up with healthcare and etc. The only thing you can do is budget for that income, budget for that expense, and then make sure that you're covering them as best you can. And know that you have enough money left in your accounts to cover the things, right? And there's a lot of different ways to increase the income you're going to have while you're in retirement. There's annuities, and you can sign up for different things that go along with that guarantee the income source. But personally, I wouldn't do anything like that if you can cover your expenses with your income that's already planned, your Social Securities, possibly working job, or taking a withdrawal from your 401k. Once you get that number, though, let's say you got a $2,500 Social Security coming, and you need $5,000 to cover your expenses. You only need $2,500 a month, right? That's what, $30,000 a year from your 401k. Well, again, that's $300,000 will cover that for 10 years. And then if you make a percentage on that money, you're really never running out. Does that make any sense? Because you just have to have enough in there to cover all those things, and then something so that it can continue to multiply and compound. That's the only way you're ever going to find out what your number is and how much you need to save. If you're just starting out, I would say, go to that 15-20%. The whole idea of 3 buckets was 50% to live on, 30% for short term, and 20% for long-term saving. I would start with that and go from there. If you're closer to retirement, then you need to make 50% what you save and try to live on the 20 or 30% that's left, because your window is closing quicker. So, and your income that's bigger is better now. So you have to take advantage of the time you have now to save. Anyway, I hope that helps a little bit. I know it's not perfect. There is no perfect formula. I'm sorry, nobody can give you one of those. I just don't believe that that's the case. However, you can do some basic math and come up with numbers that work for you to give you an idea. And then you aim to save as much as you can and cut your expenses as much as you can so that you have enough income and resources to have the best retirement that you can have. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.